I'm Seth Woolcock, and you're watching the Dynasty Hot Seat.
Oh, yes, everybody. We are back on the Dynasty Hot Seat, the only Dynasty show out there that is a certified inferno. And today, hey, long time coming, Seth. I've been wanting to get you on the show for ages. I've been on your amazing In Between Media show a couple of times. It is great to see you guys. If you don't know who Seth is, I mentioned off the rip there. He is one of the absolute legends over at the In Between Media team. He also does some stuff for Betting Pros and, of course, Fantasy Pros. He's a busy guy. He's given us some time in his day to come on talk some 2025 rookies. Seth, great to see you, my friend. How are you doing?
Mags, absolute pleasure to be cutting it back up with you today. It's a beautiful time in the football world. Yes, only one game remaining in the season, but Dynasty rookie season is ablaze. Perhaps my favorite time of the NFL calendar. NFL draft just around the corner, and this week, the Senior Bowl happening. So keeping our head on a swivel, keeping our ear to the ground, seeing what's going down there in Mobile, Alabama. But excited to be here with you today on the Dynasty Hot Seat discussing some 2025 rookies.
I can't wait to get into it. And I mean, no time like the present. We've got our sleeper draft board ready to go. We got 12 positions. Seth, this is the dream scenario because you got all 12 picks. Imagine this in your Dynasty League. You got all 12 picks. We're going to go across 2 rounds. Strap in, get ready, hit subscribe if you've not already as well, as I kind of cover our faces here. Sorry about that, Seth. I'll get rid of that for you. Let's kick it off with the 1-1. Everyone's got a different pick for here. What's yours?
Yeah, I'm gonna be the chalk pick. It's Ashton Jeanty for me, running back from Boise State, 5'9", 215 pounds. Guy's only 21 years old and just 3 yards shy this season of 2,500 rushing yards after a season where he proved as a sophomore this guy can also catch the ball. He had 43 receptions that season, almost 600 yards receiving. He led the country in rushing touchdowns and rushing yards. Boise State had a Cinderella run with a first round bye in the college football playoff. So that was awesome. And, finished pretty close, second in the Heisman voting. So all roads are pointing to a first round selection of Ashton Jeanty. I actually just released my first mock draft last week on fantasypros.com. I am going 14 to the Dallas Cowboys. And what a smash that would be to get him at your 101 of your fantasy draft rookie edition.
Yeah, everybody's got to go to the Cowboys. And it just makes me think, just because the way things are going for the Cowboys, they're going to take somebody else, aren't they?
I know. I've thought that in my mind. I said, are they going to really zag when everyone else is zigging? And it's definitely a chalky pick, but he fits that Brian Schottenheimer scheme so well. So hopefully he lands there. But really, wherever he lands, Bags, I think this guy has the potential to be a workhorse running back in this league and be a locked and loaded RB1 for years to come for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Seth. I think you're spot on. And it's been interesting. I started doing these. I mean, I think the first one I did was late October, November. So I've been hitting these mock drafts for a while. Ashton Jeanty now, the last couple of episodes in a row is really solidified. I think the last person not to take one might have been our mutual friend Eric Romoff. Might have been the last guy to not take Ashton Jeanty at one. He went quarterback at one, but I think maybe he would change his mind now. The swing seems to be going towards Jeanty. So he's locked in at 1. Who's following him at 2?
Man, so it depends on what side I wake up of the bed where I have these next 2 players. At 2, though, for me right now, currently, he's the flavor of the week, if you would. Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. I like the stature of this guy, 6'2", 223 pounds. Kind of like that prototypical size to compete at the next level, has the game to boot as well. And I get that, like, the late season upsets that kind of ended Miami's postseason bid really disappointed a lot of people. People weren't happy with him exiting the bowl game early as well. But, like, make no mistakes about it, Mags. Like, this guy brought back the U for the first time since the early 2000s, led the nations in passing touchdowns, 36 of them, second in passing yards with over 4,000. And he can boot, scoot, and boogie a little bit too. 17 rushing touchdowns at both Miami and Washington State before he transferred there. Like, I think I was too low coming into this season on Cam Ward and this entire Miami team. I liked what they did, adding Martinez. And overall, I'm more of a fan of Cristobal than I think a lot of people are. But
Mhm.
I think the move to Miami here just fit him so well, and he made the most of his opportunity down there. So give me Cam Ward at 2.
Yeah, that's a really nice point about him sort of bringing back Miami. Like before this season, I think the thing people knew most about Miami Hurricanes is The Rock used to play for them, right? So they're a
Yeah.
bit more relevant than before. I really like Cam Ward. I like how creative he is on the ball, and you're right, it does depend what side of the bed you wake up on. It one day it's Cam, one day it's well. I'm assuming Shedeur Sanders. It could be, who knows? It could be somebody else.
Mhm.
I'll not put in some spoilers, but Cam Ward is locked in. Is there another quarterback following him at 3, or is there a bit of a gap?
It is, and it's Shador Sanders. And the reason I have Cam Ward above him is like I think Cam is a little bit more upside, specifically for fantasy with what he can do with his legs a little bit more. Like Shador Sanders isn't a guy physically who's going to wow you, but he kind of wows you and just like he's so consistent in his mechanics,
Yep.
dude. Like the mechanics look like an NFL quarterback should have. And this is a guy who he's been primetime son his entire life. So everyone's been giving their best to try to beat this guy. And doesn't matter what level of competition he's faced, whether that was FCS competition, going to Colorado, and then facing some formerly Pac-12 and now Big 12 competition out there in Boulder, led the country in passing completion percentage, 74.2%. That's a great clip, even for a college quarterback playing in the Big 12, and was also third in passing yards, almost 4,000, second in passing touchdowns, 35. So he's not a great athlete. But seeing the development from Jackson State and then into Colorado really shows this guy can be a prolific passer at the next level. And, not the highest upside compared to some of these quarterbacks we saw last year, the Drake Mays, the Bo Nix of the world, who can get
Yep.
out and run a little bit more, but still a very solid pick. And it's hard in a super flex format to get away from somebody like Shador Sanders at the 3rd pick.
What do you say to I've not actually seen too much of this, Seth, but
Mhm.
there are people out there that say if he had a different second name, we wouldn't be taking him this high. What do you think about that?
I would say just look at the stats, man. Like I just rattled off a couple of them, and yeah, he did have Travis Hunter. He definitely played an offense that catered to his style a little bit and what he does best. But also, like this is a guy who's kind of been playing behind a pretty
Yeah.
ragged offensive line. I mean, they improved a little bit. They got some big boys in there out in Boulder this past year, but he has not played against a great offensive line. And this is a guy who he likes to play in rhythm, but kind of a little bit like Caleb Williams last year. He can get out and create on his own if he has to. So I think he did everything we wanted him to do this past year from a prospect standpoint. I wish it would have ended a little bit better for Colorado. Didn't like what we saw on the field against BYU, but bowl games are always weird, Mags, and I don't think you can really
Yeah.
weigh them too heavily into your overall evaluation.
Yeah, I think you're right. You look at the general season bowl games are like a little cherry on top, I suppose. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a nice puller at 3, getting Shooter Sanders. Who's following at 4?
Yeah, it's Ted McMillan. He's my wide receiver 1 of the 2025 class.
Yeah.
6'5", 212 pounds. Kind of like your prototypical X wide receiver. And I think the dude honestly has one of the nastiest catch race radiuses I've seen in a long time. He can
Yep.
be moved to the inside, the outside, back to back, 80 plus receptions, 1,300 yards, top 5 in the nation in receiving both those years. The only issue is like he played at Arizona and he kind of got overlooked, I feel like, because they were in the soft Pac-12 a year ago, come to the Big 12 and looked great off the rip. And I just don't think Noah Fafita was the guy that I thought. I was high on Noah Fafita. I had some sprinkles
Yeah.
in the Heisman department coming into the season, and just really kind of let us down. The entire Arizona team let us down. Got whacked in their rivalry game by Arizona State to end the year, and so just not a great year for them overall. But despite everything, Ted McMillan still looks like the real deal, and I think he's a guy who's going to go as high as potentially number 6 overall in this class.
Do you think now with the rise of things like the NIL money and all the money coming into college, do you think this is maybe one of the last times we see a guy as good as Ted McMillan stay in a program like Arizona the whole way through? Do you think you're going to start getting lured
Mm.
into these bigger teams as time goes on?
I mean, it's definitely tempting, right? Like every single year, it kind of reminds me of a couple years ago. I know NIL was a bit newer back then, but Zay Flowers, kind of same type of thing, stayed with Boston College when
Yeah.
they didn't have a lot going on up there. So I think you make a great point, and it very could well be. But I think maybe you'll see some hometown kids. We'll talk about one in the second round that I'm privy to who played for a hometown team. I think maybe you'll get some loyalists like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, very surprised to honestly see Tet kind of to stay loyal here to Arizona. But I think everyone had them as projected top 25 team coming into the season, and the Big 12
Yeah.
just flipped on its head, right? Like who saw Arizona State and BYU coming, right?
Yeah, just Cam Scatterboo, really. He was the only guy that I think
Yeah.
that's seen that coming. Ted McMillan, he's locked in at 4. Who's right after him at 5?
Yeah, it's Travion Henderson, running back for Ohio State. I currently have him as my RB2. I flip-flopped him prior to Nicholas Singleton's decision to forego the draft and return to college. I couldn't
Hmm.
figure out which one of these guys I like more, but Henderson was actually my RB1 in last year's class before deciding to return to Ohio State. Really
Yeah,
selfless guy. They called him, hey, we're thinking about bringing in Judkins. Hey, let me think about it, and then calls him back the next day. I'm good with it. Let's go win a chip, and that's really what they did. Probably a day
yeah,
2 pick when it comes to the NFL draft, but absolutely lived up to the billing at Ohio State. Funny enough, his freshman year was actually like his best performance overall from like accounting stats perspective, but still, even when he wasn't the workhorse this past year with Judkins in town, still very, very good. Even when you look back as a freshman, I really like what he can do from a pass catching standpoint. That's
yeah.
why he's so high for fantasy for me. 27 receptions, 312 yards as a freshman. I think it's a crazy clip. Explosive in nature. We saw him take that in the college football playoffs, the semifinal game against Texas. He takes that 70 some yard screen right at the end of the half of the house.
Yeah.
Also, amazing in pass blocking. And Mags, why that matters to me, man, is like this is a guy who I think is going to get on the field immediately on third down in the NFL, potentially as a 3-down guy as well. And that's why I just can't pass on someone like Henderson. I know he's not the hot name. I know he didn't go for 3 touchdowns in the championship game like some other people in his very backfield. But I think if this guy was alone in his backfield the past year, I mean, you could have been talking about 2,000 yards.
Easily, and he just looks so explosive with the ball in his hands, and I think that's a really good point. It's sometimes difficult, and it shouldn't be because this is the game that they're playing. But it's sometimes difficult to go back and remember, oh no, I'm not picking who I think is the best running back. I'm picking who I think
Yes.
is going to get the most points. And that pass catching with Trevion Henderson, I think, takes him over the edges of guys who are still really, really good, like Omari and Hampton. But Hampton's not going to catch a ton of passes, probably.
Yeah.
Henderson should be doing that, right?
Yeah, and I know it's probably not the most popular take. I know a lot of people are higher on Hampton. They're higher on a couple other running backs that we'll touch on, but I think Henderson's just a guy for me. Like if I have that pick probably in my draft bags, I'm probably willing to trade back because I think I could probably get Henderson
Mm-hmm.
a pick or two later and add something in addition to him. So that's really my play there is let some people reach for the next several people other than my number 6 I'll talk about in a second, but I'm okay with letting them reach on these guys at 7, 8, 9 and grab someone like Henderson if I can a little bit later in the first round.
Oh, well, you teased it, Seth. Number 6. You got to know who it is.
Yeah, it's Emeka Ibuka for me, staying with Ohio State
Yeah.
here. This is another player that has slowly made his way up to wide receiver 2 in this class for me. 6'1", 205 pounds. Pretty interesting to see if he'll actually be listed at 6'1" in the NFL. You know how those college programs
Mhm.
like to kind of, put some rocks in these guys' cleats, make sure
Yeah.
that but like I think people see him as a shifty slot wide receiver. And I think that's why a lot of people have him lower in their rankings. But I think he can also play flanker in 2 wide receiver sets. Kind of reminds me of a guy who can come in and have an immediate impact like Devonta Smith. Like this guy
Yeah.
is selfless. Not only did he play with Marvin Harrison Jr. and got overshadowed by him and the great wide receivers they've had throughout his career, but then come in. They got Carnell Tate. They got Jeremiah Smith, potentially the best wide receiver we've ever seen in college football. And
Yeah.
they're like, hey, Emeka, go on the outside, lock your guy down on a run block. I mean, this is someone I think is going to go in the top 25 picks of the NFL draft because he's such a team player. And not only can he play inside, I think he can play outside as well. Had over 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns a couple years ago with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, 25th all time in Big Ten receptions. The only issue, like I said, I think people are going to have a concern with him is he was never the best wide receiver on his team in college. But you know who else wasn't, Mags? Justin Jefferson.
I said the exact same thing a few weeks ago, Seth. Almost word for word. Justin Jefferson, he wasn't the guy, and now look at him. He's the guy. And also, look at like every year you see the top 12 sort of performers at the wide receiver position. You're going to see a couple of the guys there that are these slot guys. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown, your
Right.
gold standard up there, but like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson. I mean, Jerry Jeudy kind of. I don't even know what happened with Jerry Jeudy. That was kind of a Jameis Winston thing more than Jeudy. But these guys do make it into that top tier as well. And if Ibuka arrives on the right team at the right time, I don't see why he can't put himself right up on that top tier. And I said it before, I don't know if you agree, there's nothing better than a reliable slot guy as like your wide receiver 2 or 3.
Well, yeah, and like when's the last time, you kind of mentioned a couple of them there, but when's the last time an Ohio State wide receiver has really let us down since it's been Brian Hartline calling the shots over there in that wide receiver room in Columbus? Like, yeah, JSN kind of disappointed in year one, was a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1 in year 2. Chris Olave, when he can stay on the field, absolute stud. Garrett Wilson, same thing. Terry McLaurin, I know he didn't have as much hype back in the day coming out. He eventually makes his way to Washington, and look what he did, 13 touchdowns with a great quarterback finally in Jane Daniels. So like, I just feel safe. Like, it's not a flashy pick, but I just feel safe picking Ibuka as my wide receiver 2 in this class.
Yeah, just looking actually at the top 12, 3 of them ex-Ohio State guys.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's an absolute factory for sure. Ibuka will slot right in, no pun intended. Who's going in at 7 right next to him?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can go here. For me, I mean, I could have this guy, like this is I usually don't like to draft too many rookie drafts ahead of the NFL draft. I do have a couple leagues where we do it. This year though, I'm like, hey, can we not do that? Because I don't know where the heck to rank Travis Hunter. He's going at 7 for me currently. Bolintikoff winner for the best wide receiver in the country, top 5 in receptions with 92, over 1,100 receiving yards as well, and 14 touchdowns. And Max, this is all while being a shutdown corner, playing over 300 more snaps than anyone else in college football. Imagine what he could have done just playing wide receiver. He's a great kid too, doesn't come from a lot, kind of playing in this like newer style, more slender type of wide receiver, 185 pounds. The issue is we don't know if he'll play wide receiver or cornerback. And like, if he's not getting the full allotment of wide receiver snaps, he's really not going to have a lot of fantasy value. So he could be a second, third round guy, but if he gets to somewhere like New England, I don't think he's going to go there. I do not have him projected to go there, but if he goes somewhere like New England, I think they have to play him at wide receiver right away because they have no one there. Like, hey, we'll figure out corner later. But I think there's some interesting teams who could maybe trade up and play him at corner first, use him in some packages. So I'm kind of all over the place with Travis Hunter. But if he is just a wide receiver here, he's a top 7 pick in dynasty drafts for me this year.
Can you imagine though he goes to New England, him and Christian Gonzalez just locking things down, right?
Dude. So if I can share a little conspiracy from my latest mock draft, I actually have the Giants trading out of their early pick with the Minnesota Vikings, getting JJ McCarthy, and Minnesota moving up there, getting their cornerback one in the future, and a guy they can play in some sets with a former Bolintikoff guy, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, Sam Darnold under center. Like, that's just my like tinfoil hat, big brain theory. I maybe smoking a little herb at night or something and just got in me. I don't know what it is, but I think this guy could be, whether he's a wide receiver or a cornerback, he's going to be sensational at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely agree. He's going to be great. Even if they stand up day one, obviously he's going day one, he's going top 10.
Yeah.
Even if it's read out that it's defensive back Travis Hunter, I'm still taking little pot shots like second round, definitely third round, because we know he's got that talent. What's your strategy if he's announced as a defensive back? If the team he goes to saying he's only going to play defensive back, you still stick him on a taxi squad, right?
Yeah, you're still taking him, but you're dropping him. I don't think this is an amazing draft class. I think there's a lot of fun prospects, but I think it's deep, right? Like, we're going to talk about, my top 24 today, but realistically, there are 30 or so guys that I think could be difference maker. A lot of running backs, especially, that you kind of just
Oh
have to
yeah.
weigh what you need. But honestly, Max, I don't know if you feel this way. I don't love the class from a wide receiver perspective. I really don't.
No, no. These are the three guys that really really stand out. There's another one as well that maybe had a bit of a down year. I'm sure we'll get to him
Yeah.
in a little bit as well. But yeah, there's not much outside that. There's a couple of guys here and there that are like, oh, I maybe don't mind him, but there's not a lot of huge amount of talent at the top. Of I'm right with you with Tet being fairly firmly at the very top of that
Mhm.
list for sure. Are you going back to that wide receiver well at 8, or are you going back to running backs, or do we see a tight end? What's happening?
No tight ends as of yet. I'm actually gonna go back to running back. My number 8 overall, it's Caleb Johnson, a guy that when you just turn on the film is
Hmm.
just an absolute menace. I mean, talk about a guy who I think can really compete at the next level, specifically as a first and second down rusher. I don't know if he has the pass catching chops to be a 3 down guy, but consensus All American, led the Big Ten in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Also, was second in yards per attempt at 6.4 yards per carry. And the reason I say that, I know YPC is a really debated stat. You're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It kind of matters for me when you come from Iowa, a team
Yeah,
where historically the best player on their team's been their punter, at least on their offense or special teams. Like Kirk Ferentz and his entire clan over there has not ever ran a good offense. And I felt like it was pretty early in the season. They were like, okay, Cade McNamara is not going to beat us. We're going to start stacking boxes and seeing if Caleb Johnson can beat us. And he can beat people, right? Like he can beat
yeah,
people. One of those guys, kind of a late bloomer, only had this one truly dominant year of production. A total just about over 1,100 yards before this season, and then explodes for that, 1,500 and 21 touchdown mark. So I like Caleb Johnson. This is a guy like I don't think he's going to be flashy, but he has the upside to me of an early career Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, I like that. I like that comment. I don't. The only comments I don't like is I got people saying he's like Najee Harris. I'm like, that's just because he plays in the same uniform. Like you're just that's just an easy that's an easy layup there. But I really like. I think Johnson. It's probably unlikely that he's going to go to a team where he's definitely the bell cow, but he's going to go somewhere, and there's going to be a running back in that room just going, damn it, like this isn't
Yep.
going to end well for
Yep.
me, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah. There's a couple of guys that are right on the edge. Like if he goes to like Chicago or something like that,
Oh,
he could win that back room for sure.
man, I would love him with the Bears in a Ben Johnson offense. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be. I mean, that's your Knuckles and Sonic right there, right? Like you got someone. Obviously, Swift is not on the level of Jameer Gibbs, but
yeah.
someone like Caleb Johnson who can kind of be your hammer, your thumper on first and second down. Bring in Swift to change pace a little bit. I would love it up in the cold. I think that would be awesome. I would love to keep him up here, up in the north, where we play cold weather ball. I think that's where Caleb Johnson fits best.
Geek people will start calling him Taylor then, right? Oh, sorry, that's terrible. I'm sorry. So let's move off that. We'll move to pick 9. Who's following up good old Taylor at 8?
It's Tyler Warren for me, tight end out of Penn State. And I
Nice.
originally, as the offseason began, for college at least, I had Tyler Warren closer to the end of the first round, and he's slowly been creeping more and more up my rankings after perhaps the greatest college football regular season of all time for a tight end. I mean, it's hard to knock this guy. And the thing I love about Tyler Warren is not only was he an absolute clinic in the receiving game, second in the entire country in receptions. That's not for tight ends. That's like including all wide receivers as well. 104
Hmm.
receptions, seventh in receiving yards with over 1,200, but also former quarterback, lethal as a ball carrier. I mean, he had over 200 rushing yards at Penn State. And the way that Andy Kotelnicki lined this guy up, especially later in the season, they would line him up in gun. They would line him up in Wildcat. They would line him up under center. He'd motion out. Like he can cause so much misdirection. This guy, the easiest way I can put it in perspective for those of you who have not watched a ton of Tyler Warren, maybe you're not a Penn State fan like myself. I understand. We always let people down at the end of the season. I'm still trying to get over that loss myself, Mags, but he is Taysom Hill. If Taysom Hill could catch the ball like George Kittle and have that pass catching upside as well. Like I think we're going to see a ton of Tyler Warren using him in different ways. I think like I know the hype for tight ends is kind of out of control after what Brock Bowers did, but
Yep.
this is the guy. This is the guy who I think can have a tight end one rookie season like Brock Bowers. I don't think he's tight end one or anything, but I think there's weeks that you could go out there and Tyler Warren in the NFL could drop you 30 fantasy points because he takes a long run to the house, because maybe he throws one. Maybe he catches 2 touchdowns in the back of the end zone. I don't know if you saw that toe tap a couple weeks ago in the back of the end zone, but this guy is
Oh, yeah.
nice. I love Tyler Warren. I can't say enough about him. Wherever he goes in the NFL, as long as it's not like another AFC North team, I'm probably buying his NFL jersey. So love me some Tyler Warren. Bias is in there, though. I will say that. Big Penn State guy, big Tyler Warren guy.
Seth, I'm grinning ear to ear because you won't know this because this episode is not out yet as the time we're recording. I had John Bauer on here a few days ago, absolute legend.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about Tyler Warren, I said, I mean it with great respect, but he reminds me of like a young Taysom Hill.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because I felt like I was coming out of left field when I was kind of throwing that out. And so I'm so happy. You're the first other person I've heard say that. So do you have him right kind of in the same range? Do you think I'm high on him? Do you think I'm low? Because I know a lot of times we make our money in Dynasty by drafting tight ends in the 3rd, 4th round, right? The Tucker Crafts of the world. But
yeah,
I just feel like Tyler Warren is a difference maker enough. I'm willing to pay a 1st round pick for him, specifically here at the end of the 1st round.
I got him, and I really like Loveland as well. I think he wasn't really being able to being as used well as he could be. So him and Loveland are super super close. I kind of need to dive into tape study a little bit more. But I think if you took either of them around here, the back end of the 1st round, it's hard to argue against because we've seen the tight end. Like look at Brock Bowers. How many people are kicking themselves that they didn't take Brock Bowers? Like.
Yep.
It's a huge difference maker, and if you can lock in someone this young who's going to be good, I don't see why you wouldn't do it. But yeah, I'm so glad you said the Taysom Hill thing because he's just one of those freak athletes. And as JB pointed out, Taysom Hill didn't start playing football till he was like 26. So Warren's got such a huge head start on him. I can't wait to see where he goes. Hey, maybe he goes to the Saints.
Yeah. Oh man, let's easy there. I don't want to buy a Saints jersey. No one wants to buy a Saints jersey, Mags. Easy there.
Let's get him going to my Chiefs instead. He can replace Travis
Kelce. I would be all right with that. With that.
Yeah, that's
at number 10 here also, Mags. I'm going to go back to the running back position. It's Omarion Hampton for me, coming out of North Carolina. This is someone I think we're really split on as a dynasty community, and I'm okay with that because I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big ACC guy. I don't think the ACC has quite the level of competition, specifically on the offensive and the defensive line, that for running back prospects, I'm usually lower on these ACC guys. I was lower on Javonte Williams when he came out a couple of years ago. I'm kind of back in that same mix here with Omarion Hampton, but you can't deny what this guy's been doing. A true workhorse here at North Carolina the past 2 seasons, 1,500 yards as a sophomore, and then comes back 1,600 yards, and also can catch the ball quite a bit as well, right? 38 receptions this year, 29 the year before. Really like what he can do as a ball carrier when he gets into open space. I'm curious to see whether he can really translate, and whether his tackle breaking is as good as it looked here at North Carolina, because he was not breaking the tackles of Big Ten guys and SEC guys, in my opinion. So I like Omarion Hampton. I think there's a reason that he's led this conference in rushing these past 2 years. Like, he's a really good running back. I think I'll probably be a little too low on him to get him in most of my drafts, but I still think he's deserving of a 1st round pick in dynasty drafts.
Yeah, it's always so difficult whenever you're looking at, like, you can only kind of judge what's in front of you and what you see. And what you do see with Hampton is that he is breaking all these tackles. He is running through people. And at times he makes it look easy. There was only 2 games this year he didn't rush for 100 yards, which is just like incredible. Like, so it's hard. I need to look through. I'm not sure if he did play any particularly high competition. I'm looking at his schedule here. nothing really stands out, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, he really was up for a
Minnesota,
challenge, you know, that's it.
I think they played Minnesota, maybe to
Yeah,
even crack open the year, and like that's a Big Ten team, and you know that was one of the games that I was really trying to pay attention to when I was watching him back. Is like, hey, can this guy get it done? And because Minnesota, you know, not the best team. I don't think anyone really enjoys watching Minnesota Golden Gophers football, but at the same time, like they gave Penn State a run for their money. They were giving some Big
yeah.
Ten teams a run for their money this season. So I did respect that game, but you are absolutely right. Like not a lot of fierce competition he was facing down there.
Yeah, so he's going to be a real interesting prospect. He's going all over the place, Seth. I've had him go as high as 102, and I've seen him
Wow.
slip to the back of the second. I've
Wow.
never seen a spread quite like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up and what draft capital he gets. That's the case with so many running backs, though, as you
Right.
know. And
Oh yeah.
is that where you're going next? Are you going right back to running back? Because there are a lot of them.
There are. I'm actually going to go wide receiver here. I'm going to throw out my wide receiver four, recent wide receiver four, I should say, and it's Elick Ayomanor, wide receiver out of Stanford. And I get that. Yeah, you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling to find this guy because I think he's off a lot of people's radar, and rightfully so, right? Like a pretty putrid 3-9 season for the Cardinal. Very inconsistent quarterback play. Originally Ashton Daniels, he gets hurt or hurt, as they say. They bring in kind of a bevy of different quarterbacks to throw to him. But anyone who watched Stanford could tell that A.O.
Hmm.
Manor, whether they were playing TCU at the beginning of the season or they pull some crazy upsets at the end of the year. Like A.O. Manor is clearly one of the best players on his team. I think he's a true alpha wide receiver, the way he can line up on the outside and go up and get you a ball when you need it. He did regress some from like a yards per reception standpoint, wasn't as explosive, but I think coming into this season, everyone knew like you could play a drinking game in Stanford's first game against TCU. Every time they mentioned A.O. Manor, oh, why aren't they going to Elick out there? And still back-to-back season, 62 plus receptions, 6 touchdowns. Again, I know I'm not a huge ACC guy as I just laid out, but he's someone who I think this week at the Senior Bowl is going to turn heads. And I think when we get to
Yeah.
Indianapolis at the Combine, he's going to turn heads as well. I don't know if you'll have to draft him at 11, but I think that's where he should be going. And I think maybe we're ahead of the curve on this one, Mags.
He's one that if you're ever not sure what he can do, it's not this year. You look at last year where he had Travis Hunter on toast, went for
Mm,
300 yards and 3 touchdowns against Colorado, being
yep.
marked up against Travis Hunter, who we spoke about earlier as a complete lockdown corner. That is the ceiling for a guy like Elick Ayomanor. And there's a lot of smart people, including yourself, who have him right around here. And I'm seeing it more and more. I think you're right. The Senior Bowl, where he's going to have hopefully a productive quarterback throwing the ball. This could be where we see Ayomanor start to rise up, and this becomes more of a consensus. But
Yeah.
Seth, I mean, that means that we can't take this guy wherever we want. Like, do you get sometimes annoyed by that? You're like, I've got this guy. Like, I think I'm higher in consensus, and then the consensus catches up, and you're like, God
Yeah.
damn, I can't get as many shares as I want.
I mean, I remember putting together my Dynasty rookie rankings, or at least reorganizing them a little bit coming into the college football season. I had A.O. Manor at that point still top 15. I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be the high guy on him probably coming into the season. And I absolutely was. I think high, and I've gotten higher on him, but I feel like everyone's slowly catching up, and I'm slowly losing my edge, which I'm not happy about as well. You're definitely spot on there, Mags.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the coolest name in the draft as well, Elick
Yes.
Ayomanor. Like that's
Yes.
got to be worth some bonus points for him for sure. And we got one pick left in
Mm.
the first round. Who's it going to be?
Yeah, I got so many mixed emotions of this guy. Cost me a lot of money in bowl season. Jalen Milroe, quarterback, Alabama.
Oh,
In a
yeah,
draft without a clear quarterback 3, Drew Allers is returning. Quinn Ewers kind of fell down a little bit this season compared to, I think, where a lot of people had him ahead of the
yeah,
2024 season. But I think there's going to be a quarterback needy team that trades back into the first round that goes after Jalen Milroe, especially when he shows off what he can do with his athleticism at the NFL Combine. I mean, we're talking about a guy, I don't know if he will break Anthony Richardson's records that he has set there. But I think he has a great shot, specifically in the 40. I'm curious to see this week at the Senior Bowl. Like, I know what you can do with your legs, Jalen Milroe. I need to see what you can do with your arm. Can you show us
Yeah.
you can sit back there in the pocket and get through progressions? Because that is what he has not shown he can do. Also came out earlier today. Kid's got little hands. I mean, we're talking Kenny Pickett size hands. So that's not a great sign. But at the same time, to me, like 719 rushing yards this past year, 20 rushing touchdowns. That's seventh in the nation among all players, not just at the quarterback position, but all players. And, there were times where he could not be stopped, whether it was against Georgia
Yeah.
in that first half of that game. He was electric. LSU, I mean, they looked like they just saw a bat out of hell with this guy. So they could not stop him. Then in the Iron Bowl at the end of the season as well, I mean, he just took over that game with his legs. We saw bad games like Michigan. We kind of got a rainstorm there in the
Yeah.
Pop-Tarts Bowl. That burned me quite a bit. Also, he lost to Oklahoma towards the end of the year. That was a bad game. Like, he has some bad film. He has some really bad film. But I want more mobile quarterbacks in fantasy. And I know it's so hard to trade for quarterbacks in Superflex format. So I got to go Milroe here at 12. Originally, before his kind of down collapse at the end of the season, I had him as high as 4 in my rankings. So I've actually moved him back, but I still really like Milroe and the upside he offers you here at 12 overall.
What do you do in a one QB league with Jalen Milroe? Does he even sneak up to QB1?
Ooh. I mean, you could make an argument. You can make an argument. Like, again, I think it'll kind of depend on the draft capital. I think you're definitely kind of putting down all these guys in a one quarterback
Yeah.
league, right? Like, I don't think I would take any of them in the first round, maybe the first 15 picks or so. But yeah, I think he definitely has an argument with that for sure.
You know what? This is bold for now, Seth. I think he's going to go top 10 in the NFL draft.
I felt the same thing, Mags, and I felt like I was very on a limb. And then I just saw the bad tape with the Oklahoma game and what he did in that Pop-Tarts Bowl. And I was really like, man, if I'm seeing this and I'm getting worried, I wonder if NFL scouts feel. But look at like his production profile is better than what Anthony Richardson did in college. And I think he's
That's what
going to
I
have.
keep going back to. Yep.
Yeah, and like I think someone's going to fall in love with him in the first round of the NFL draft. I don't know who. It could be someone in the top 10. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would be intrigued to see what the betting markets have to say for him as a top 10 pick. I think maybe that would be a nice little dart we could throw. You might be getting a 10-1, 11-1 number. So I think you're onto something there, Mags, and I don't think you're on an island with that thought process at all.
Last thing on him. Is Michael Vick's QB 40 time of 4.33, is that under threat? I think he'll run it pretty close.
I think it's going to be damn close. I think it's going to be really, really close. I
Yeah.
can't remember what Richardson's is off the top of my head, but I know Richardson had a good one. I think he could beat
Yeah.
Richardson, and I think he has Vic within his sights for sure. And if I'm him, after I go and show my passing prowess here at the Senior Bowl, of course, he's going to have a pro day as well down there in Tuscaloosa. But I think aside from that, like, I'm gearing up. I'm getting with some running coaches. How can I set the world on fire and go out and run the fastest 40 ever for a quarterback?
I love it. That is great. So that's round one done. Before we dive into round two, thanks for joining us, everybody. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button. Hey, we're almost at 1,000, by the way. That's pretty cool. Hopefully you can
Awesome.
help us get along the way. Seth, round two, let's speed run through a little bit here.
Yep.
Why don't you give me 3 picks in a row, and then we'll maybe focus in on one
Yeah.
player to chat about. So let's go 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3.
Yeah. So Luther Burden, that's another guy
Yeah.
for me. Like, I think I'm just lower on consensus than Luther Burden. It's really hard to look back at his tape because when you look at Missouri was running some crazy schemes, outproduced by a guy in that same offense, Theo Weiss. I think this team as a whole underperformed this season. Top 5 team projected coming into the preseason, but he's still a Brady Cook. So I just have a lot of questions. He still does profile as a true X. 5'11", so a little shorter than some of the, your super, standout X wide receiver. Twitchy though, so I like him there. Quinshawn Junkins, another guy. I mean, this guy is a certified weapon. Had over 1,500 yards as a freshman. Kicked Zach Evans out of Ole Miss. It really put himself on the map despite being just a 3-star recruit. The downside to me with Judkins, and I'm sure we can discuss it further, is like I just saw him in that national championship game get out to a 70-plus yard run, and he could not outrun the defenders despite having a ton
I
of
noticed the
separation.
same thing. Yep.
So I just worry that the top speed is not there. We haven't seen him really as a pass catcher. I think he can be a pass catcher and a better pass blocker. Just Ohio State didn't see him use that. So I'm a little worried this is, kind of a situation at the combine that maybe he has a slow time. Maybe it drops him into the back half of day 2. Trey Harris for me is going to go at 15. 2024 Balintikoff Award semifinalist, fifth-year senior. Will be 23 before the draft, but at the same time, for me, like I think Trey Harris, he proved in his final year at Louisiana Tech he could play against Conference USA competition. Led the conference in so many statistical categories. I know it's a G5 conference, but then comes to Ole Miss and it translated, right? Like 5th in the
Yeah.
conference in receiving yards in 2023 and 2nd in 2024, over 1,000 receiving yards, and he played just 8 games. 6'3", 210 pounds. I think he's the ideal guy who could be a flanker for someone who has an already established wide receiver 1. But I also think he can play inside as well. I am currently going to Washington at the end of the first round. So he's a first round talent to me, and I love him here at 15.
I love all 3 of those picks. There's one we got to focus on. We spoke about it briefly before the show went on air, because I got to hit the big red hot take button, Seth, because you see, and this is the first time he's dropped out of the first round, it's Luther Burden. He is still, top 5 wide receiver for you, but what is it in particular about him that you have him out of the first round?
I mean, you just look at the production this past year. Like, there was a lot of hype around this Mizzou team, man. Like, I'm a big Mizzou guy. Like,
Me too.
they're always kind of the little brother of the SEC, and I was like, man, like I think they actually have a good squad going in here. And it's like just the fact that he didn't produce at the same level that he did the year prior, that Theo Weiss outproduced him in the receiving yards metrics. Like, I just think if you're a true number 1 wide receiver, especially at a place like at Missouri, you should not be outproduced by anybody in that category. Cook was banged up a lot of the year, so that's part of it. It's just really hard for me to get a read on Luther Burden right now. Like, can he be a true X wide receiver, or is this more like a Quentin Johnston type of guy who still a very good NFL wide receiver, but not someone that you want as your true alpha? That's what I'm just trying to figure out with Burden. I'm trying to look back at the tape, but as I mentioned, Max, the tape's really hard to watch because the scheme was just really, really weird what Mizzou was doing all year.
He does have one thing on over Quentin Johnson. He doesn't have bricks for hands, at least. So
Yeah.
That's one thing he's got over QJ for sure. But yeah, Burden, it's hard to argue if you just look at the tape for this year. It's not all that impressive. Brady Cook, Luther Burden, all those guys. Tell you one thing about Theo Weiss, though. I put out a few tweets about Theo Weiss. His fans come out to support that guy.
Oh, really?
They love them some Theo Weiss. So shout out to him. I don't think, has he declared for this year? Is he going back to Mizzou? I don't.
I think he's going back. I think he is going back. Yep.
Yeah, hopefully we'll talk about Theo next year on the show, Seth. So that's your first 3 loaded up. Who's going at 4, 5, and 6 in the second round for you?
Yeah, Matthew Golden, wide receiver coming out of Texas. This guy is a blazer. Popped off against Georgia in the SEC championship game. 8 receptions, 162 yards. We know they got guys like Malachi Starks on that back end of the Georgia secondary, and he just had no regard for them as well. So also single-handedly kept them in the game against Arizona State in the Peach Bowl, 7 for 149 and 1. Like, kind of a guy that I think I had a little oversight on my part coming into the season. I didn't realize like Matthew Golden was really nice like that. Transfer from Houston, adds a little bit in the return game if you're drafting like Scott Fishbowl or something.
Yeah.
Also a speed merchant, when the ball's in his hands, yards after the catch type of guy. So I really like Golden. I'm not sure if he's the biggest lad, right? Like I don't know if that dings him down into late day 2. If so, maybe I will be a little lower on him. So I have him there. I also have a guy you mentioned earlier, Colston Loveland. Love what this guy has done. Actually, I think for most people was the clear tight end 1 coming in this class. It was just really hard to watch Colston Loveland this past season as well because the quarterback position. I mean, we got Alex Orji, we got Davis Warren, we got Jack Tuttle. I mean, were you in the quarterback room for Michigan this past year? Like, I mean, it feels like everyone was, right?
Was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They flew me out for a
Okay.
while. I just handed it to Khalil Mullins and let him let him do his thing.
No, and I totally understand that, man. Like it's tough with Loveland, but still 56 receptions, almost 600 yards, 5 touchdowns this year. And he was still like the impact of him on the field. You could feel it. Like he was Michigan's
Mhm.
first read in the passing game, the few passes they would throw each game, first team All-American honors, John Mackey Award finalist as well. Like I still like him. I think he's a guy like to me, like could he end up somewhere like Los Angeles? Go back to his
Ooh.
former coach and Jim Harbaugh. We know that run blocking is a part of his game. We know you have to be a run blocker in Greg Roman's scheme. So I like Colston Loveland there. Tez Johnson comes into me here at number 18 for me. And the thing I like about Tez is just so smooth, man. Like this is
Yeah.
a guy just smooth with the ball in his hand. Transferred from Troy coming into 2023 is when he first stepped on the field at Eugene, and man, did it show. Like I love these guys like Harris, like Tez Johnson that transfer from a G5 school and they prove, hey, I can do it at every level. And he absolutely did, man. Like 1,100 yards last season, still just about over that 900-yard mark this year, 10 touchdowns. I think a lot of people said, okay, is Tez Johnson or is Evan Stewart the guy here at Oregon? It was pretty clear to me, man. It was Tez Johnson.
Yeah, it was very, very clear. Although, I did hear a theory about about that and the fact that Dylan Gabriel can't throw to his right, which
Oh,
was
really? Okay.
like a huge issue for Evan Stewart. But yeah, Tez Johnson, man, let's talk about Tez Johnson. I think this is the first time his name has come up bizarrely in
Oh,
like
wow.
about a dozen of these mock drafts I've done. I think do people look at him and think, are we still looking at players and saying they're too small? Because that seems like an outdated theory.
Yeah, I mean, when you see, who's translated the next level, you don't have to be a prototypical X wide receiver size to make it in this league. I mean, look at a guy like Jordan Addison. Look at a guy like Devonta Smith. I mean, we see it every single year. Abuka's a guy in this class that I think is going to defy that a little bit too. And I don't know what it is about Tez. I don't know if it's just like people are, kind of downgrading him a little bit because after what we saw this past year from the Oregon wide receiver, oh my god,
Troy
Troy
Franklin.
Franklin. Yeah, Troy Frank. I
Yeah.
could barely think of his name because he was a non-factor this year. Like I think people see him and how he fell down draft boards into day 3, and I think
Yeah.
people worry that maybe Tez does that same thing, but I don't think he does. I think he does go on day 2. Where do you see him going in the draft?
Yeah. Well, before I started doing this, and I was sure he was going to be, yeah, a day 2 guy. It's just so much talent, so electric when he gets the ball in his hands. I like how shifty he is as well. Seems like for a guy that is a little bit undersized, he's still quite hard to bring down because he's like
Mhm.
slippery when he's got the ball
Yeah.
in his hand. So I really like what I see from Tez Johnson. We know that a lot of the times people are concerned about the scheme that Oregon run and does it always translate, but I think Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson are quite different players. So I don't see how that would fully translate. But I
Mhm.
think you're right. I think that is what's happening a little bit, which is
Mhm.
a shame for Tez. But hey, me and you'll just scoop some more of him up in the second and third
Yeah.
round. So that'll be fine for us, Seth. So he's locked in. Let's go 7, 8, 9, shall we?
Mhm. Yeah, Ollie Gordon, out of Oklahoma State for me. He's going off the board here first. Walker Award winner from the previous year, best running back in the country in
Yeah.
2023. 2024, just a disaster of a season. I mean, not only has the Oklahoma State defense just really fallen off the last few years, but I just don't know what they were doing, man. Like there's so many games early in the season, and look, I had a Big 12 future on Oklahoma State. I think I was as high on this team as just about anyone out there talking college ball this year, and they just would go away from Ollie Gordon. They wouldn't use him. So like, I have a lot of question marks about what was going on there, and he was another guy who probably could have got more NIL money. So I give him credit for staying there and having just a brutal season at Oklahoma State, regressing, but the traits are there, right? Like we saw him run all over the Big 12 the year prior. I think he's still an absolute brick house. The reports out of the Senior Bowl is that he's looking like the real part. I mean, that he's just looking like a boy among men's out there at the running back position. So I
Mhm.
like him a lot. Give me Cam Scattaboo as well. Perhaps the most interesting running back prospect, I think, in this class. We touched on him earlier. Transferred to Arizona State after playing a couple years at Sacramento State. Lost a bunch of weight coming into this year as well and kind of broke out to the tune of over 1,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. Also really good with the ball in his hands, 37 receptions,
Mm-hmm.
500 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. I think that's what makes him a fantasy threat. Like, you look at him, you look at what he did against Texas and brought Arizona State back on the.
Yeah.
Look, I get it if you're playing Boise State or you're playing one of these G5 teams, but like Texas is one of the most legit defenses, and they could not stop this guy. So I just think he's going to be a real threat, 5th in the Heisman voting. So I like Cam Scatterbo quite a bit. Dylan Sampson, another running back. I'm going to go running back, led the SEC
Nice.
in rushing yards. I think Dylan Sampson's a really, really quality back. Like, do I think he has quite the upside as some of these other guys in the class? No, not really. But do I think he could be a number 2 running back in the NFL? And if he goes somewhere like New England and Ramondre Stevenson keeps fumbling, could he take over a job? Absolutely. So these are kind of the guys I have in this range here, Max. Just a lot of good quality running backs who I don't know if they'll be starters right away in the league, but I think absolutely have starting upside eventually. We might just have to wait a year or two.
Let's go Dylan Sampson here, because he started off the season real hot.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Dylan Sampson. The thing that stood out to me, even though he wasn't the biggest guy in the world, that guy's so good at finding the end zone. Not the same player, but like Blake Corum at Michigan was very similar. Not the biggest guy, but he knew how to score. I just find it so difficult sometimes, Seth, and I don't know if you're the same or you can help me out. I don't know. Is that the offensive line? Is it the running back? It's so hard to tell sometimes. It seems like for Corum, it might have been the offensive line in Michigan. Do you think it was the same for Sampson, or I can't tell, man?
Dude, well, first of all, I got egg all over my face after the year Blake Corum had, man. I don't think anyone was pumping this guy up. I've already kind of proclaimed my love for Big Ten and SEC running backs, and Sean McVay, I got a bird waiting for you, buddy. Like, I mean, talk about all the second round picks that I put in Dynasty last year into Blake Corum, all the 10th round redraft picks and the best ball darts I was throwing at him did nothing this past year. But so you might be right. It could have been the offensive line, and he obviously didn't do something at the next level that Sean McVay liked. And Sampson's a funny guy because even last year with Wright in that backfield, Sampson would kind of come in and be the change of pace guy. And I actually think he played that role very, very nicely, had 7 touchdowns last year, had 6 as a freshman as well. So can catch the ball a little bit. I think he's a little bit better of a pass catcher. Nico Alamalev wasn't really throwing him the ball too well. I felt like a lot in the flat, but still a guy I think that can handle a heavy workload. The offensive line was great, and I think we're going to see Tennessee struggle. I'm actually, if anyone wants a free pick, I'm actually on the under of Tennessee 9.5 wins for next year. Right now, I think it's minus 122 over at Bet River. So I think it was a great offensive line, absolutely, and it definitely helped him. So I think like I could move Sampson up or down, kind of depending what we see out of him here at the Senior Bowl, and also, or excuse me, not here at the Senior Bowl, but in Indianapolis in a couple weeks.
Yep. Yeah, he's one I definitely got my eye on. I'd like to see him being mentioned, though, because he was one of my favorite guys, one of my highest scorers in terms of what I've seen just in my casual watching of college football this year. So I like seeing him there. And we got 3 more picks. We got running back, just to show the depth at running back. I wonder if we're going to see any more in the last 3 picks of the draft.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one right here. Devin Neal, another. When we were talking about hometown kids, this is the guy that came to mind. He's he was born and raised right outside of where Kansas University is here. I think a lot of people were actually surprised that Neal returned to Kansas for his senior year, and pretty bad season for the Jayhawks overall. 5-7, finished towards the bottom of the Big 12 there, but like Neal. He lived up to his billing. Like he did everything the same, like almost identical numbers from the season before, like scary, almost identical. 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns. Also really good pass catcher, added over 250 yards as a receiver as well. So I like Devin Neal. I think he's an absolute weapon. I'm really curious to kind of see. I know he's out there in Mobile this week and kind of hear what the reports are. Because like I just think like Andy Kotelnicki leaving that team and going to call the plays at Penn State hurt them as a whole, or I think maybe Devin Neal could have been someone who went for 1,500 and 20 touchdowns. So I like Neal a lot. I also throw out Isaiah Bond here
Yep.
at 23. I loved Bond coming in this year. I thought Bond was going to be the real deal, Mags, and it just didn't translate to Texas really. Like, I think part of it's Quinn Ewers, right? Like, I don't think anyone would say, man, Quinn Ewers had an awesome year here, I feel like. But I mean, he was working with Jalen Milroe last year and had a better season, obviously banged up down the stretch. But I just worry that, like, I think Isaiah Bond's going to be one of the fastest players in this combine coming up. I think he's someone you can probably sprinkle potentially to win that 40-yard dash for the position.
Yep.
But I just don't know if it. I don't know, man. I'm so mixed. That's probably terrible analysis on Isaiah Bond, but not the biggest guy. I don't know if he can truly be a difference maker on the outside at the NFL level, but he definitely has the tools to do it. We saw it since this guy was a freshman at Bama, dude. He has the tools. He feels like a raw prospect to me. I think he's a guy that if you're drafting him, you're waiting 2 or 3 years for a pop, if there ever is a pop. Now I'll round us out here with my favorite quarterback that we haven't touched on. I know a lot of people are on crybaby Jackson Dart and everything. It's not Jackson Dart. I don't like I think Jackson Dart is a crybaby. I think he's good with his legs, so I think people like him. I will actually go Kyle McCord. I think Kyle McCord is one of the best throwers of the ball here in this class. I mean, Fran Brown, I love Syracuse, man. I love this entire team. I love LaQuint Allen in this backfield. I mean,
Yep.
gobbled up receptions, 60 plus receptions. I mean, I almost tried to put LaQuint Allen up in my top 24 too. I just couldn't do it with some of these other running back prospects that we have. But Kyle McCord, I love what he did a year ago to Ohio State. Wasn't always great in clutch situations, but he showed he could play in the Big Ten against big guys and big offensive lines, big defensive lines, and play in cold weather. I would love if my Steelers would take a shot on him in day 2, day 3.
Mm.
I just think when you look at his mechanics, he looks like an NFL prospect with kind of what we've been seeing out of him at Syracuse. I just love the orange this year. Again, not an ACC guy at all, but I mean, he made Syracuse almost appointment television on a weekly basis this year.
He was one of the guys who I almost couldn't believe what you were watching him and going, it's like, wow, Ohio State could really do with Cal McCord, right? It's just like, wow, what a
Yeah.
transformation he had. It was him and Cade Klubnik, who both guys
Yes.
I thought really turned it around this year and was really, really nice to see. I love that Cal McCord's getting some light shined on him. And yeah, he's got all those fundamentals. He's been through adversity. He's come back again.
Yep.
Those kind of things really, really help. Isaiah Bond, interestingly enough, looking up his best games in college this year, every single one of them with Arch Manning.
Wow. Yeah, I just felt like him and Quinn just didn't really have the best
Yep.
chemistry. I don't know what that was, and it felt like down the stretch, like they relied on Gunnar Helm at the tight end position,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Blue, Travion Wisner getting a ton of run back there, and when they needed it, they'd go to Golden. It just felt like Bond kind of got phased out down there down the stretch, and like they probably could have needed him, right? Like I think he's a guy
Yep.
who I was kind of circling. Hey, will he show up against Ohio State? I think we'll learn a lot, like in this pre-combine process about him, like where are the medicals with Isaiah Bond, because I just don't know if he
Mm.
ever got healthy after being injured for half the season. I don't know, so many question marks. I mean, the sky's the ceiling for this guy, but he's someone I honestly, Max, could move well outside my top 24, depending kind of what shakes up here in Indy over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And Seth, we can't let you go without saying it's people's favorite topic. What are some of these sleeper guys that you have? And don't worry,
Oh,
we'll not tell anyone. But if you got any like sleepers you like 3rd round, 4th round, I'm going for this guy.
okay, yeah. So I mentioned one of them already, LaQuint Allen. I think this is a
Yep.
guy who, I mean, he is a certified wrecking house, man. I mean, he put the team on his back. I had him. I had actually had the underdog money line against UNLV. I'll never forget this guy getting tackled before the line of scrimmage on a 4th down play and just breaking tackles, shredding tackles. So I think he's someone who could be really, really good at the next level. If you want a sneaky quarterback, to me, I absolutely love what Curtis Rourke out of Indiana has been putting on tape, former MAC player of the year at Ohio a few years ago. I think Curtis Rourke's kind of a sneaky guy. Someone you might not even have to draft in some
Yeah.
leagues that I think you can kind of throw at the end there as well, kind of just on the end of your taxi squad there. So those are probably my two favorite sleepers currently: Curtis Rourke and LaQuint Allen. Kind of, I don't think people are talking about these guys quite as much as maybe we should be.
Yeah, I've got one. I was sure this guy was going to come up a lot more. I don't think he's been mentioned once by anyone on the show. Xavier Restrepo getting no love from anyone.
Mm. Yeah, Restrepo is tough. I actually was really curious to kind of see what he could be down the Senior Bowl, because it was just last year we saw Miami wide receiver kind of pop and get highly taken up in the draft there, and I could see Restrepo being someone. The reports out of the Senior Bowl weren't great today, but I think the kid's a physical freak. I think he's a physical freak, so I don't mind that call at all. One more, if I could throw one out too, Mags.
Of
I don't know if
course.
you've had a chance to break down Savion Williams tape at all, but coming out of TCU, the tough thing with these players is like a lot of his touches were manufactured, right? Like he was actually playing
Mm-hmm.
some wildcat quarterback at the end of the year because their quarterback play was so terrible there at TCU. But he's another guy, had a great 2023 season, not as great 2024 season, but over 600 rushing yards. I believe over 600 receiving yards as well. So Savion Williams, someone, oh man, there are so many ranges that he can go. We've seen how these manufactured touches guys. You could get a Laviska Shenault out of this guy, which it does
Yeah.
absolutely nothing for you, or you could get Deebo Samuel. So Savion Williams, one of those other guys. I just kind of wanted to quickly mention, someone I think that probably going to go, I would say, outside the top wide receiver 12 range, but someone right after that I think should be highly considered.
Absolutely love it. Love chatting sleeper picks in particular. Actually,
Yeah.
it's always good fun. And Seth, this was an absolute blast, as I knew it would be. Just mate, thank you so much once again for coming on to the show. Can you just remind everyone listening where can they find all your brilliant work online?
Yeah, first of all, Mags, thanks so much for having me, man. Love the hot seat every time I get to tune into it, and just a great bevy of information you got over here. So make sure y'all are supporting Mags, giving this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Subscribe to the Dynasty Hot Seat channel as well. And easiest way to support me, I'm on Twitter at between_SethFF. I'm also here on YouTube at IBT_media. You can find all my work over there, from my college football opinions, my NFL opinions, my NASCAR opinions. And then also over here on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, the audio feed, the Betting Pros YouTube channel and audio feed. Actually, currently right now, me and Debro, we're hosting the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show each and every single week during the NFL offseason, leading up to that big day out in Green Bay, Wisconsin in just a couple of months from now. So we're going to be breaking everything down, from quarterback prospects, wide receiver prospects, and more sleeper picks as well. And just really kind of get a good feel for this NFL draft class. And he's one of the best in the business. So excited to continue to break it down with him, as I am you and everyone in this awesome Dynasty fantasy football, college football community we got going on over here, Mags.
Absolutely love it, Seth. That was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much once again, and thanks to everybody at home for listening and watching too. We'll see you very soon, but remember, for anything Dynasty you need to know, keep it locked on the Certified Inferno. See you soon. Bye-bye.